Rain whispered against the corrugated roof of an old hangar hidden behind a curtain of palms. Inside, the air smelled of oil salt and patient years. A single fluorescent tube flickered above the wings of a forgotten plane whose aluminum skin was dented like a veteran's coat of armor. Rivets gleamed in rose tiny constellations under the tropical damp. Maya adjusted her camera and spoke softly, her voice half lost in the hum of insects. "They called it the ugliest plane design ever built," she said, trying a smile for her channel. The lens caught the shape, square-jawed nose, stubby wings, a tail like a carpenter's afterthought. It looked less like a bird than a stubborn tool. From behind the fuselage came a shuffle and the rasp of cloth over metal. Hal Bennett straightened, wiping his hands on a rag dark with age. He wore coveralls the color of graphite and eyes that had seen too many trial flights. "Ugly design, yes," he said, voice gravel warm, "but built to keep going." Maya lowered the camera a little. "You worked on this one since she was drawings on paper." He tapped the nose gently, back when engineers drew lines, not pixels. He reached to a bench where an old blueprint lay curled at the edges, the paper soft as cloth. "See this design sheet, Rev A. We changed the intake angle here just enough to breathe thick air. Florida jungle air's heavier than ocean wind." Maya leaned closer. Raindrops echoed on the roof steady as a metronome. The plane's skin smelled faintly of zinc and persistence. So she asked, "Why keep it?" "There are cleaner models, faster ones." Hal smiled faint and uneven. "Cleaner, sure, but they quit when the temperature climbs or the dust clogs filters. This one," he tapped the engine cowling, never complained. "Ugly, saved lives." He went back to wiping small circles of care. The camera caught reflections of his movements, the way light trembled across his hands. Online, a preview of the live stream began to fill with laughing emojis. Junk engineer, Rust Museum. Someone typed, "That thing couldn't fly a kite." Maya hesitated. The phone in her pocket buzzed with alerts. Hal didn't notice. He was listening to the hangar breathe the drip and tick of settling metal. "Funny thing," he murmured. "People think beauty's a shape. To me it's endurance." The lights blinked once, dimmed, steadied again. He looked up as if the building itself agreed. Maya turned the camera back on him, her tone changing. "Maybe you can show me why it still matters." He nodded a slow acceptance. "Give me daylight tomorrow and a charged battery. We'll wake her up." Outside, thunder rolled across the tree line, low and promising. The fluorescent tube flickered one last time, leaving brief darkness between its breaths. In that pulse of quiet, the outline of the plane stood firm, awkward, stubborn, still whole. In this jungle, reliability's uglier than glory. The diner's neon sign buzzed like a trapped fly in the rain. Through the steamed windows, jungle light bent into amber stripes across chrome stools and half-filled coffee cups. Hal Bennett sat at the corner booth, spreading a roll of blueprint paper across the laminate table. The paper breathed out the smell of graphite and machine oil decades old. He steadied it with a coffee mug and a small metal tag, the prototype serial plate dull silver with stamped numbers worn smooth by years of handling, a mechanical relic against the gloss of plastic menus. Maya set her recorder between the salt and the sugar shaker. "People online want to know," she said, "if that old design even worked." Hal smiled without looking up. He traced a line in pencil, careful and slow. "Worked enough to keep pilots alive. Look here." He circled the intake with the dull point. Rev C intake lip fix for airflow stability. 3 degrees off saved engines and cross-humidity. The pencil scratched a dry sound under the neon hum. Outside, rain thickened to sheets. Chief Dalton came in from the parking lot, shaking water from his jacket boots, leaving wet prints to the counter. He spotted Hal's spread of blue paper and chuckled, voice loud enough for the room. Still preaching that antique Bennett. That design should have stayed buried. Hal didn't rise to it. He kept his hand on the drawing thumb resting on the cereal plate. "Buried things have a way of holding ground," he said quietly. Dalton snorted. "We have composites now. Algorithms. Your pencils can't keep up with the weather." Hal folded the edges of the blueprint, smoothing each crease like tucking in a child. "Funny," he murmured, "the weather's what keeps proving us right." Maya caught the tone respect dressed as defiance and glanced toward Dalton, who already turned for the door. The bell jangled once, leaving the smell of wet canvas behind. Hal looked down at his coffee. The foam had cooled into a thin skin. He was a student once, he said. Believed numbers fixed everything. You don't. I believe numbers tell stories same as people. You just have to read the margins. He slipped the blueprint back into its tube and laid the metal tag on top. The diner lights reflected off its surface, throwing a brief star across the ceiling. For a second, Maya imagined the reflection as an engine spark waiting for ignition. Outside, the downpour pressed harder, rattling against the glass like 1,000 tiny wrenches. The sound filled the pause between them, an honest working silence. Hal reached for his raincoat. "Storm's coming," he said, folding the blueprint under his arm. "Modern ones don't like humidity." He left a few coins on the table, the kind of tip that spoke more of habit than wealth, and pushed through the door into the wet heat. The neon buzzed again, softer now, as if agreeing that some designs still breathe best in bad weather. Thunder rolled down from the coast like steel drums beating time. The hangar doors trembled in their hinges, light seeping through in quick white flashes. Rain hammered the roof so hard it drowned the generator hum beneath it. Hal Bennett bent over the open hydraulic assembly, sleeves rolled to the elbow. His hands were steady, deliberate. Maya held a flashlight above him, the beam shaking with every burst of thunder. "Power grid's out," she said. "Figures," Hal muttered. "Modern systems blink first. Old ones just wait." He reached for a grease-stained notebook, the test log, and flipped to a page crowded with penciled numbers. Each column carried neat initials, each date written by hand. The ink bled slightly from humidity. The laptop on the bench flashed an error code screen, dimming, then went black. The new diagnostic rig they'd borrowed from the university shut itself off with a low sigh. Maya stared at it. "That's it? We can't run telemetry." Hal chuckled, once the sound more breath than laughter. "Telemetry's a luxury. Torque is truth." He took up a manual gauge and set it against the line feed. Pressure climbed, hesitated, settled right where he expected. Lightning flashed again, the storm painting the fuselage a ghostly silver. "Old design, tight tolerances," he said. "She starts when others sulk." Maya checked the figures. On the last page of the log, the column read MTBF equals 1712 hours. The number glistened with graphite. She raised her voice over the wind. "If it's right, that's already near record." Hal wiped his hands and looked toward the plane's nose. "Let's see if she can hit 18. He reached to the starter switch, an analog lever with chipped paint, and pulled. The propeller twitched once, stalled, then spun again. A cough, another. Maya held her breath. The sound deepened into a rough growl, a heartbeat against the storm. "Come on, girl," Hal whispered. The propeller steadied, blades turning into a gray circle. The noise filled the hangar, clean and full. A surge of blue light from the control panel washed across the puddles on the floor, turning the water into mirrors. Hal's reflection bent in the ripples. His eyes were two bright points fixed on the gauges. Temperature stable. Oil pressure within range. RPM holding. He wrote the readings by hand, water dripping from his sleeve onto the paper. Maya leaned close, voice half in awe. "It's running smoother than the training fleet back home." Hal nodded once. Because it was built by people who couldn't afford failure. Outside wind pulled at the palm fronds, spraying mist through the door gap. The smell of wet metal filled the air. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the engine did, patient and rhythmic. Then the power flickered back on generator, coughing awake. Modern lights returned sterile and white, but the old plane kept its own tempo beneath them. Hal closed the test log. Graphite smudged across his thumb like grease. "If she starts," he said quietly, almost to himself, "we fly." Maya looked through the door at the storm still raging and smiled, rain already beating on her hair. "Then I hope the sky's listening." The engine answered, with a steady roar, refusing to yield. Outside, thunder cracked, but never reached the hangar's heart. Inside, endurance had found its voice. Dawn came thin and gray, the storm receding, but the air still alive with static. The runway shimmered with puddles that mirrored the jungle canopy. Hal Bennett stood at the open hangar doors, rain jacket half zipped, watching mist lift off the aluminum skin of the old plane. Every rivet gleamed as if freshly forged. Maya tightened her headset and climbed into the jump seat behind him. "Visibility's low. You sure she can handle this?" Hal settled into the cockpit, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. She was born in worse. He flicked a row of toggle switches. The instruments glowed green. The old analog dials mingled with new digital readouts patched in by Maya's team. Static crackled through the radio, a dry hiss layered with the sound of wind sweeping through the palms. The engine caught on the second turn. A heavy-throated roar filled the cabin, steady and confident. Hal eased the throttle. The sound deepened, becoming a rhythm that pressed against the chest more than the ears. "Hydraulics stable," he said. "Fuel flow clean." Outside, the rain had softened into a gray curtain. He pushed the throttle forward. The plane rolled, then lifted, water spraying from the wheels like silver threads. Maya held her breath as the jungle dropped away. The horizon opened green, fading to gray clouds streaked with sunlight. "Altitude 700, she called. Hal smiled under the brim of his headset. "Keep an eye on the HUD." The numbers flickered across the transparent display. MTBF equals 1820H, failures equals 0, temp drift within spec. Maya's voice cracked between disbelief and pride. "The data says it, this plane design just became the most reliable in the jungle." Hal didn't answer right away. The rain on the canopy had turned to beads sliding backward into air. He adjusted trim the stick smooth beneath his glove. "Told you," he said, finally quiet enough that it felt like a prayer Uglies built to last. The clouds broke ahead of them, revealing the wet ribbon of coast. Sunlight scattered through the cabin, flashing over the worn metal, the scuffed panel labels, the faint graphite smudge where Hal's finger had traced numbers the night before. Maya checked the telemetry laptop balanced on her knees. Every column showed green. "Validation pass confirmed," she said, almost laughing. "No anomalies." "Then she did it," Hal murmured. "Design held." He banked slightly, turning the plane back toward the field. The wings sliced through a sheet of rain. Droplets burst into a fine mist that glittered in the light. For an instant, the world outside seemed to slow the propeller, a translucent disk, each drop of water hanging before it fell away. A bead of condensation broke loose from the canopy and traced a line down the glass. Hal watched it slide, smiling faintly. In that movement, all the years of doubt, all the mockery about obsolete lines and ugly angles fell away. He spoke into the radio voice, calm. "Prototype 06 to base design validation passed. Returning." Static answered, then Maya's quiet laugh. Now they'll trust her again. Hal looked through the windshield at the jungle strip appearing between clouds. "They'll trust what works," he said. The engine hummed unwavering. Beneath them, the jungle glistened in broken sunlight, proof that endurance, not elegance, had the last word. As they descended, the storm finally gave up, leaving only the steady pulse of the propeller and the whisper of air against the wings, the sound of a promise kept. By late afternoon, the storm had moved out to sea, leaving the airstrip bright and slick, the hangar breathing that clean metallic smell that comes after rain. The old plane sat beneath an open skylight, sunlight tracing every rivet as if signing its own approval across the fuselage. On a nearby workbench, a laptop buzzed with notifications. Maya had uploaded the flight footage at dawn. By noon it was everywhere, short clips of the takeoff, the test log flickering green, the line that read MTBF equals 1820H. Failures equals 0. The title read simply, Ugly Design, Perfect Record. The radio in the corner hummed through static. A host's voice came on warm and half amused. And in today's news from Florida's Jungle Coast, an experimental aircraft once written off as obsolete has proven the most reliable in tropical tests. 0 failures under storm conditions, folks. 0. Hal Bennett listened without looking up. He was writing numbers again, logging every hour since the flight, neat as ledger work. Habit more than need. Maya leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand. 2 million views, she said. Comments are full of engineers asking for your blueprints. Hal gave a quiet shrug. Blueprints don't teach patience. The hangar door opened with a squeal of rollers. Chief Dalton stepped inside, still in his damp field jacket. For a moment the sound of boots on concrete was all there was. Then the bell above the side door chimed faintly. The diner bell from across the field had followed the wind here, a tiny echo of the night before. Dalton cleared his throat. Bennett? Hal didn't turn. You here to file another report? Dalton held out an envelope, stiff and cream-colored, embossed with the factory seal. No, to deliver one. Hal hesitated, then wiped his hands on a rag before taking it. Inside lay a factory QA card and a test certificate crisp, freshly signed. The ink gleamed. At the bottom, under the stamped serial number, was Dalton's own signature, for design discipline and reliability under extreme conditions. Hal read it twice silent. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders eased just slightly. Dalton shifted his weight awkward in the quiet. "You were right about the tolerances," he said finally, "and about the humidity." Maya grinned behind her mug. The jungle voted. Dalton nodded once, almost a salute, and turned to leave. The door chime rang again, softer this time, almost polite. Hal looked back at the certificate. The line of his name beneath Dalton's looked steady, confident. He reached for a pen, uncapped it slowly, and added his signature to the factory board ledger mounted by the workbench. The sound of metal nib against paper was sharp and final. Outside, the light shifted. A thin shaft of sun slipped through the hangar window, resting on the plane's nose. The radio voice came again. 0 failures under storm. Sometimes the ugliest design just outlasts the prettiest promise. Hal set the pen down, his fingers brushing the edge of the card. The paper felt heavier than it should, weighted with all the nights he'd spent arguing with silence and equations. He smiled faintly. Maybe, he said, looking toward the jungle tree line beyond the door, the jungle finally understood discipline. Maya raised her camera again, capturing the reflection of sunlight on the certificate, the silver tag on the bench, the old plane behind him, ugly, steady, alive. Morning came soft and golden, the kind of light that forgives every scar. The jungle shimmered beyond the hangar, wet leaves trembling under the hum of distant cicadas. Somewhere a guitar played from a radio, lazy and warm, its notes threading through the open door. Hal Bennett stepped into the sunlight, carrying the prototype serial plate in both hands. The metal was cool edges rounded by time serial numbers, faint but still legible. He knelt by the concrete pedestal outside the hangar, newly poured, still smelling faintly of lime. On it waited a fresh brass plaque polished enough to catch the morning sky. The inscription read, "Most reliable in the jungle design. Validation, 1942, 2025. Hal placed the plate beneath it, aligning the two pieces like pages in a long book finally meeting. He brushed his fingers over the engraved letters, following the grooves, as if tracing a memory. The rising sun caught the edge of his hand and turned the metal amber. Behind him, Maya raised her camera but didn't speak. The shot didn't need words. Birds wheeled overhead, their wings flashing silver against the canopy. Hal exhaled slow. "When we drew her in 42, he said we thought she'd serve a few missions, maybe 5 years. Turns out the jungle had longer plans." Maya smiled, lowering the lens. "You think anyone will fly her again?" "She's earned her rest," Hal replied. "But the lesson discipline outlasts fashion. That'll keep flying." He stood for a moment listening. A faint engine hum drifted from far off, the new generation of test planes taking their morning run. The sound was thinner, higher, but it carried the same stubborn heartbeat. On the hangar wall behind them, the factory QA certificate still hung, the ink dried hard and dark. Beside it, the old test log lay open to its last line, "Validation pass. 0 failures under storm." Maya had left it that way on purpose. Proof shouldn't be polished. It should breathe. Hal took a rag from his pocket and wiped a smudge off the plaque. His reflection looked back at him, older-lined but content. "You know," he said softly, "everybody keeps talking about innovation. They forget maintenance is its own kind of courage." The radio's guitar drifted into a final chord. Silence followed, thick and kind. Maya pressed the record button one last time. "Say something for the closing line," she urged. Hal thought about it, eyes on the plaque. The sunlight shifted through the leaves, dappling the letters with moving green and gold. He smiled. "Ugly designs," he said, voice low but clear. "Just outlived the pretty ones." The camera light blinked off. Birds scattered into the morning air. The sound of that faraway engine rose, dipped, and was gone. The hangar settled into stillness again, the smell of rain fading into warm dust and oil. Maya packed the camera, turned to leave, then glanced back. Hal was still standing beside the pedestal, hat in hand, looking at the plaque as if it were an old friend. Sunlight reached farther into the clearing, glinting off the prototype serial plate, and the words above it, proof of what persistence could do when the world wasn't watching. And for the first time in years, the jungle light felt like applause. Morning light spilled through the hangar roof, catching the plaque Hal had set beneath the palms. The metal shimmered like a second sunrise, every letter clean and calm. Around it, the air smelled of oil and rain, the quiet hum of a new shift starting down the line. Reporters called it proof of persistence, but Hal only saw the lesson drawn in brass good design serves, then disappears. The reflection of the blueprint corner glowed in the sunlight, a soft echo of the first pencil marks that started it all. Beyond the tree line, another test engine rose, its tone folding into the same steady rhythm that had carried them through the storm. A faint guitar drifted from a distant radio as if the jungle itself were keeping time.